Good morning, family and friends. I'm going to make a butternut squash mac and cheese today. And in this pot, I got my water boiling for my pasta. And in this pot, I'm going to start the butternut squash cheese covering. Anyway, I'm going to move the camera so that you can see the process that goes on in this pot because we've all watched a pot boil. I started with a 1/4 cup of water and frozen butternut squash, and this is what I'm using. I was excited to see this because the only ingredient, I'll show you, is right here, butternut squash. There's no preservatives, there's no salt, sugars, nothing else added, just butternut squash. So I'm going to give this a try, and it'll be a good lesson to learn so when I'm growing my own butternut squash, how I can prepare it and freeze it to be able to use in recipes later on down the road when it's not in harvest. Anyway, thought you might like to know that. So again, in this pot, I've only got a 1/4 cup of water and the butternut squash, and I'm going to wait for it to soften up. And then I'll be adding 4 tablespoons of butter. And then I'll be adding salt and pepper and kind of getting that incorporated. I do want to stir it every now and then because I don't want anything to burn to the bottom of the pot. Oop. One escaped from my pot, and I don't want it to burn on my stove. All right, so we'll just let it keep cooking and softening up. This will take 5 to 7 minutes, so I understand. I just added my pasta noodles to the water that was boiling. This looks like it's coming along really well. So let's start the process here. So I'm going to add 4 tablespoons of butter. And again, my favorite is the Gourd-geous butter. And I want to get this down in there so the bottom doesn't burn. And while the butter is melting, I'm going to add 1/2 teaspoon of salt, and I'm using kosher salt. So 1/2 teaspoon of salt, and 1/4 teaspoon of pepper, and I'm just using the white pepper. Turn my flame down just a smidge more. And I'm just gonna cook and mash. This is eventually going to get pureed. Okay. with the butters completely melted, I'm going to add a 1/4 cup of flour. And I'm going to cook this down. When you add your flour, you want to constantly stir. But you can see how it's just thickened up. And I just keep cooking and mashing. Not worried about getting all the lumps out because we are going to puree it. 2 cups of milk, slowly. Okay, we're going to let this continue to cook down. Okay, now I'm going to add a 1/2 teaspoon of garlic powder, a pinch of cayenne, a teaspoon of thyme, and I have some more salt and pepper in here as well. So we'll just get that all mixed in. And we're going to bring it to a simmer. I'm taking this nice and slow because I don't want it to burn. So, and I want it to get to a simmer. So it gives the butternut squash a chance to really get nice and softened up for pureeing. It gives the flavors a chance to blend and combine. So my fontina, I'm just cutting it up in little cubes, and I'll put in there and let it start melting. Cutting it up in little pieces to help it to melt a little quicker. And then I'm going to add 1/2 of an 8-ounce package of sharp cheddar cheese. And we're going to stir it till it gets all nice and gooey melted. I'm going to turn the heat off at this point, let it set for a minute, and I'm going to pull out my blender. Just want to make sure that that fontina is melted up really good. Again, I'm not worried about the butternut squash chunks because when it goes in the blender, it'll get all pureed real nice. I'm going to pour this into, I have an Instapot blender, so I'm going to pour it into here. Right. Brave souls. I didn't do too bad. Usually this is where I'm a disaster. I am going to wipe the edge though. All right. Now we're going to put it on my Instapot. Okay. I did the pulse because it'll push things up and down. It looks really good. And it will thicken up as it sets. You know how flour and gravy is. As it sets, it gets thicker. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to pour this over top of my noodles, mix it up. There's my pasta. I'm just going to pour this sauce all over the inside. My daughter is a mac and cheese fanatic. I'm going to have her try some of this. So I'm excited that Toby has joined us, and she is going to try this butternut squash mac and cheese with me, and we're going to give you our honest opinion as we taste it. So we'll let you know here in a minute.
Here we go. Mmm. It's actually pretty good.
I really like the creaminess of the butternut squash. I think you could probably use a stronger cheese. I used Fontina and sharp cheddar, and but I like Fontina a lot.
Right, and I like cheddar, so.
Yeah. But I think that I used seasonings of the garlic salt. I used my black truffle salt. Not garlic salt, I used garlic powder. And then I used a pinch of cayenne, but I think I probably could have used a little more cayenne pepper.
Yes, I would prefer myself a little more cayenne and just a tiny bit more salt. And believe it or not, you guys, I really don't care for squash that much, so this is actually a pleasant surprise for me, and it's actually really good. So
there's a lesson learned. You may not like something the way it's fixed, but maybe if it's fixed in a different way, you might like it. And I was that way with yams. My mom made yams, and there was so much brown sugar and marshmallows that I did not like it at all. So when people said, oh, you got to try these yams or these sweet potatoes, it's like, no way, I didn't like it. And someone made me try a sweet potato fry, and it was like, okay, heaven. And that's when I learned that lesson, is that just because you don't like it, it just means you don't like it the way it's prepared. But if it's prepared differently, it might be really good. So be adventurous and try it. So with that said, with a mouthful of food,
make it a gorgeous day every day. Bye.